We had a tenant who paid her rent on the 1st of every single month, never missed. And every month, that money did not reach our account until the 5th or the 6th. And she wasn't late, her system was. And that was our fault for not catching it. So here's what we've learned. Most late rent isn't a tenant problem. It's like a design problem. So today, Kevin and I are pulling back the curtain on our exact setup, the lease language that we use, the software, and the late fees. So on-time rent stops being something that you chase and starts being something that, just happens.
Welcome to Your Landlord Resource Podcast. Many moons ago, when I started as a landlord, I was as green as it gets. I may have had my real estate license, but I lacked confidence and the hands-on experience needed when it came to dealing with tenants, leases, maintenance, and bookkeeping. After many failed attempts, fast forward to today, Kevin and I have doubled our doors and created an organized, professionally operated rental property business. Want to go from overwhelmed to confident? If you're an ambitious landlord or maybe one in the making, join us as we provide strategies and teach actionable steps to help you reach your goals and the lifestyle you desire, all while building a streamlined and profitable rental property business. This is Your Landlord Resource Podcast.
Hey, landlords. Welcome back to the Your Landlord Resource Podcast. I'm your host, Stacy Casella, and I'm here with my co-host and former boyfriend, Kevin Gilroy.
Hi, that's okay. Former boyfriend and current husband is what you meant to say, right?
Yeah, got to keep those people guessing, Kev.
Well, that for sure perked up my ears. Oh, well, okay. Today we're talking about the most stressful recurring event in a landlord's month.
The first.
The first. That window between the 1st and the 5th where you're refreshing your bank app like it's a slot machine.
And I want to say something right up front because it reframes this whole episode. When landlords come to us frustrated about late rent, they almost always describe it as a people problem. My tenant is irresponsible. My tenant doesn't respect the lease. And sometimes that's true, but in our experience, the overwhelming majority of late rent is not a character issue. It's a systems issue. Now, that system could be on the tenant or it could be on you. For the tenant, maybe their auto pay never got set up, or their bank takes 6 business days to clear an ACH transfer, or their invoice is going to an email that they never open, or they genuinely believe that the rent is due on the 5th because that's what your grace period has taught them. And none of that is a bad tenant. That's more like a leaky system. And here's why that distinction matters. You cannot fix a character problem, but you absolutely can fix a system problem. If you believe late rent is something that you chase, then you've signed up to be a collections agent for as long as you own that property. And if you believe it's something that you design out, you build it once and it pays you back for years. And Kev, before we get into the how, can you talk about the why? Because for a lot of our listeners, this isn't an inconvenience. For them, it's truly a cash flow emergency.
Yeah, and this doesn't get said enough, especially for folks listening who own 1, 2, maybe 3 doors. If you're a big operator with 100 units, a late payment is like a rounding error. Your portfolio absorbs it. You have the reserves, the staff, a legal budget. But if you own a single family rental or a duplex, that rent isn't extra money. It is the money. It's your mortgage, your taxes, your insurance escrow, your HOA. And those bills don't care if your tenant's payroll gets delayed or their bank is slow. So when rent lands late, you're mildly annoyed, because if you don't have ample reserves, you're floating somebody else's obligation out of your personal checking account. And I've watched landlords do that for months, quietly, because maybe they're embarrassed to make it a thing. They don't want to be the bad guy or piss off the tenant in fear they won't renew. So they just eat it. And then the tenant gets a very clear message: nothing happens if I'm late. Now you've trained them to do the exact behavior you're trying to eliminate.
Right. But I do want to clarify one thing before we dive into this episode. We cannot stress enough about the importance of reserves, because those reserves may have to cover you should a tenant not pay their rent one month, or if you have someone who just stops paying and then you have to go and evict them. I'm not going to get into how reserves save you when you have an emergency repair either. If you'd like to learn more about reserves, go check out episode 28. It's called The Cash Reserves Blueprint: Protecting and Expanding Your Portfolio. That episode breaks down everything you need to know about cash reserves and why they're so important to the financial safety of your rental property. Today, we are discussing getting your rent paid on time. And that term, on time, has a different meaning for everyone. But for landlords, if you collect rent on the first of the month, on time means you're receiving your rent on the first. All right, so let's get strategic. If you do only one thing from this episode, do this one. Fix how the money actually moves. That's where the biggest and the fastest wins are going to be. Start with the payment terms that you should eliminate, like you never want to take cash, because there's no receipt trail that's going to protect you. It can be a safety issue for whoever's collecting the rent, and it invites every dispute that you can ever imagine. Then we have paper checks. I know some of you have a tenant who's paid by check for 11 years and never missed, and if that's working, fine. We have a family member who still insists on getting their rental checks in the mail. But understand what a check costs you. It has to be written, mailed, delivered, deposited, and then cleared. That's 5 points of failure that have nothing to do with your tenant's intentions. And then you're in an argument about whether they sent it, and you can't really verify that. The third, and this one's an unpopular opinion, stop using Venmo, Zelle, Cash App, and PayPal to collect your rent. We did a whole episode on it, episode 51, The Hidden Dangers of Using Cash Apps to Collect Rent. The short version, these are peer-to-peer consumer apps built for splitting a dinner bill, not a landlord-tenant relationship. No landlord protections, no real ledger, no way to block a partial payment, and no clean way to refuse money when you need to refuse it. And we'll get to why refusing a payment can be legally critical in a minute. So what do you use instead? You use a real rental collection platform. We've talked about them in the past. You've got TurboTenant, Rent Ready, Inago, Doorloop. All those apps do rent collection really well. It's what they were actually created for. But we're not getting into those today. We'll link them in the show notes so you can check them out. And, there's several good ones out there. These are just the ones that we like and that we recommend. But here's what they give you that a Cash App can't. Reoccurring ACH auto pay that the tenant sets once and forgets. Automatic invoicing, automatic late fees, a permanent ledger that you can hand to your CPA or your attorney, and settings that can block partial payments. The auto pay piece is the whole ballgame. When a tenant sets up auto pay, you've removed the human being from the transaction, not the tenant having to remember every single month, no putting it off, and then them thinking, I'll do it on Tuesday. The money just moves from the tenant's bank account to yours and on time.
And you can even take it a step further, making setting up auto pay part of your move-in or onboarding process. Some landlords we know won't hand over keys until the auto pay is configured. You will never have a better moment of leverage or a more motivated tenant than the days leading up to the move-in. So there's a wrinkle in electronic payments that bit us, and I guarantee it's biting some of you right now. We invoice our tenants through QuickBooks. Works great. Ties into our books, invoicing is automatic, and Stacy has an accounting and finance background, so she's happy. But ACH transfers are not instant. Depending on the platform and the banks involved, an electronic payment can take anywhere from 1 to 7 business days to actually land into your bank account. That gap, also known as the float, is where good tenants become late tenants. We had a tenant, lovely woman, paid on the first every single month. Set up auto pay herself, very conscientious. And it kept showing up in our account on the 5th or 6th. Technically, by our lease, she was late. But was she? In her mind, she paid on the due date. In her bank's mind, the transfer was in progress. And in our lease's mind, rent isn't paid until it's in hand. So we gave her a call, and that conversation is a good model because we didn't lead with the fee, we led with the explanation. The conversation went something like this. Hey, we appreciate that you're paying on the due date, but here's the problem. Your service takes 5 days to deliver it, and our lease says rent has to be received by the due date, not sent by it. So we need you to move your payment date up. And you know what? She happily did, and it was never an issue again. The fix is 2 parts. 1, know your own float. So go actually look up how long your platform takes to settle. Don't guess. And 2, put it in the lease and say it out loud at signing. Ours spells out that we use QuickBooks, that payment can take 5 to 7 business days to reach us, and that we ask them to send it no later than the 25th so it arrives on time. That one sentence has probably prevented more late fees than anything else we do. And you guys, take notice of what we're doing. We're not enforcing, we're communicating. A tenant who's late because nobody explained the mechanics isn't a bad tenant. They're an uninformed one. And that falls on all of us landlords to be clear so that they know.
Yeah, and we've said it many times. When you're a landlord, communication is key. The sources you communicate through and the way your communication is actually written is key. You are a business owner. Take the time and the responsibility to speak and write clearly and professionally to your tenants. Shoot, write what you want to say, upload it to AI, and have that help you make it easy to understand and grammatically correct. Because in this day and age, there is absolutely no excuse.
Didn't we do an episode on communication?
We did. It was more about the methods of communicating, but we did talk about the importance of it. It was episode 87 called Essential Communication Methods Every Landlord Should Know. And we also did one on ways that landlords can use AI in the rental property business. That's episode 128. Both of those are key tools for landlords, and we'll link them in the show notes. If you have not listened to those yet, you really should. All right, let's talk about the lease, because everything we've described is downstream of what your lease actually says. We did a full 3-part masterclass on our lease and the addendums that we use. It's episodes 32, 33, and 34. Now, I'm not going to go into detail about those here, but 4 clauses that you should include in your lease will specifically drive on-time payment. And the first one, you want a clear, unambiguous due date. Rent is due on the 1st, not beginning of the month, not monthly. Rent is due on the 1st. Number 2, and this is the one people miss, define what paid means. Our lease says rent must be received by the first to be considered on time. That's received, not postmarked, not initiated, not I hit send. When it hits our hands or our account, that's when it's paid. If your lease does not say this, you will lose the postmark argument and you will lose it repeatedly. Number 3, think hard about your grace period. And here's something that surprises people. In California, there is no statutory grace period for rent. It doesn't exist in the law. That 3-day thing that people cite is the 3-day notice to pay or quit. And that's an eviction step. That's not a grace period. Any grace period we have is one that we chose to put in our own lease. Now, some states do mandate a grace period, so look yours up before you write anything. But wherever you are, this principle holds. And here's the trap. If you write a 5-day grace period, you haven't created a cushion. You've moved that due date. You've taught your tenant in writing that the rent is really due on the 5th. Now, ours is short and deliberate. It reads, due on the 1st with a grace period through the 3rd. And that's enough to absorb a weekend or like a bank holiday. Not enough to become a new normal. Number 4, in your lease, you want a joint and several liability clause. This matters enormously if you rent to roommates, partners, or any multi-adult household. It says every person on that lease is individually responsible for the entire rent, not just their portion of it. Without it, if one roommate flakes, you're stuck trying to collect from someone who will very reasonably tell you they already paid their share. And with it, the full balance is owed by each of them, and sorting it all out becomes their problem, not yours.
Yeah, and we've actually lost tenants because of that clause. So now we make sure that when there are roommates, we explain this before they sign the lease. Basically, you better make sure that whomever you're moving in with is financially responsible, or you might find yourself in a place where you're getting evicted for unpaid rent. Okay, late fees. And I have to be careful here because I'm going to tell you a story about something we did and then tell you why we do it differently now. So years ago, and this was before we knew better, we had a tenant with a guarantor on his lease for the first year. Paid on time, model tenant. The second that guarantor came off, he started paying late. Not by days, but by a couple weeks. And this occurred every single month. Our late fee then was a flat $25. So he just paid the $25 along with his late rent and went about his life. To him, it was a small subscription fee for paying whenever he felt like it. At renewal, we had a decision. Again, this was when I was first a part of Stacy's family's company, so I really had no input in the decision.
Way to throw me under the bus.
Well, no. What I mean is, this guy was in place and paying late before I came along.
Correct. This was back in the day before I really had any experience or understanding of how decisions like this really affected the business. My job was to keep the money coming in and avoid vacancies like the plague, which I did.
Right. And confidence in your abilities as a rental property owner grows over time, you guys. That confidence allows you to make decisions which, in the long run, are better for the success of your business. All right, anyway, we did renew the late paying tenant, but we restructured the late fee to $10 a day starting on the 4th of the month. And for a number of years after that, we collected an additional couple $100 from him every month. And at the time, we called it free money. The building was paid off, and the other units in that Sacramento sixplex were covering us. So we weren't really strapped. We had the option to wait for his late rent and that $200 plus late fee to come in. Here's what we know now that we didn't know then. And before I get into it, I need to say something to everybody listening who owns rental property outside of California, because this is the single most state-specific topic in this whole episode. Some states cap late fees at a flat percentage of the rent. Some require a minimum grace period before you can charge a late fee at all. Some cities layer their own rules on top of the state. So whatever I say about California in the next couple of minutes, please do not take it as your rule. Go look up your state and your city, and if you're not certain, spend an hour with a local landlord-tenant attorney. An unenforceable late fee clause is worse than having no late fee at all, because you find out at the worst possible moment. All right. Here in California, there is no dollar cap on late fees, but that is not the same as anything goes. And here's the part that surprised me. California doesn't set a maximum late fee. There's no number in the law that says you can't go above this. What we have instead is a standard. And the standard is that your late fee has to be a reasonable estimate of what the late payment actually costs you. Now, sit on that for a second. Not what you think the tenant deserves, not what'll finally get their attention, what it costs you. Your time chasing it, the bookkeeping, a bank fee, real costs. And here's the kicker. In a residential lease, the burden is on the landlord. If a tenant challenges that fee in court, you don't get to say, well, it's in the lease, they signed it. You have to justify the number, and that's not theoretical. There's a California case, Del Monte Properties versus Dolan, where a landlord's late fee got thrown out for exactly that reason. So here's the test I'd apply to your own late fee. If you had to stand in front of a judge and explain how you landed on that number, could you? If the honest answer is, I picked it because it seemed like enough to motivate them, that's a penalty, and penalties don't hold up. Now, I'm not an attorney, and I'm not telling you your fee is invalid. What I am telling you is have a California landlord-tenant attorney look at that clause before you need it, not after. And make sure the lease says the fee is a reasonable estimate of your cost and explains why those costs are hard to pin down. And again, that's California. Your state may hand you a bright line number, which honestly is easier to work with. So please take the time to look it up. One last practical trap, because this one wrecks eviction cases in a lot of states. Be very careful about putting late fees into a pay or quit notice. That notice is for rent. Padding it with fees or other charges is one of the most common defects that can get an eviction case tossed. Check how your state treats it before you serve anything.
Yeah, we've spent a lot of time on consequences. So let's flip it, because the dangling carrot is wildly underused by self-managing landlords. Most of us only have a stick. So they pay late, they get charged. But there's no upside for the tenant who pays on the first for 36 months straight. They get nothing. And that's a missed opportunity, because there's something you can give them that costs you almost nothing and that they genuinely want. And that's a good credit score. Rent is the largest recurring expense in most people's lives, and historically, it's done nothing for their credit score, while a homeowner's mortgage builds credit every single month. So offering a tenant the option to have on-time rent reported to a bureau hands them something with real financial value in exchange for exactly the behavior that you already want. And this is especially powerful with younger tenants, much like the two 23-year-olds who are fresh out of college that we just placed in our 2-bedroom unit, with a guarantor, of course. If somebody's in their 20s and trying to build a credit file so that they can eventually buy a house, knowing that paying you on the first moves that needle is a far stronger motivator than a $25 fee. Now they have skin in the game. California actually has a law about this now, and the details matter. It's AB 2747, and it kicked in April 1st of 25. It requires covered landlords to offer tenants the option of having positive rent payments reported to at least one nationwide credit bureau. And you can charge the tenant up to $10 a month for that. It has to be offered at lease signing and at least once a year after that. If a tenant opts out, they can't opt back in for 6 months. Now, most small landlords are exempt. The exemption covers a building with 15 or fewer units, and landlords only lose it if two things are both true. They have to own more than one residential rental building, and you're a REIT, a corporation, or an LLC with at least one member that is a corporation. So that knocks a lot of people out. Now, I want to be precise about that second prong because I went and checked against our own portfolio, and I think people will get this wrong in both directions. Holding your property in an LLC does not by itself put you on the hook. The statute says at least one member of that LLC has to be a corporation. So if you're the sole member, or it's you and your spouse, those are individuals. You are still exempt. But if you bring an entity partner in at any point, that changes the math. It's worth 5 minutes checking your operating agreement. And if you're listening outside of California, please don't assume that nothing applies to you. Check your own state before you write this off. Either way, credit reporting on behalf of your tenant is a great tool, even where it's optional. And most of those property management platforms that we mentioned earlier have options in there and support it.
So we don't offer that as an option, correct?
We do not. And here's why. Our sixplex in Sacramento consists mostly of professionals. Now, not that that means that they're financially responsible people, but we have pretty strict criteria, which usually weeds out applicants that are in need of that rent reporting. Those roommates that we mentioned earlier actually qualified credit-wise. Both their credit scores were well over 700, but they didn't have the income requirement, which is why we had to bring on a guarantor. I will say that if we were the primary management for the Idaho fourplex, that we would use rent reporting because the tenants that we have in those units would never qualify for the Sacramento property. And it doesn't mean that they're bad or they don't pay on time. It just means that their credit scores are not as strong and could absolutely benefit from rent reporting. If you guys are interested in rental reporting, all the landlord management software companies that we recommend, that was Turbo Tenant, Rent Ready, Inago, Doorloop, all of them have the capabilities of adding that service on for your tenants. If you don't use landlord software and you want to do this independently, then we recommend using Rental Kharma. This is a really good company, you guys. They were created just for this purpose, and helping tenants with less than par credit is all that they do. They're a smaller company, which we like, and the goal is not just to report credit, but to educate and guide those tenants on best practices to get those credit scores up. And they have Spanish-speaking associates in case your tenants need that. And if you send your tenants our link, then they get $10 off that setup fee. And as always, we'll link them with all the other software companies in the show notes so you can check it out.
Okay, let's talk roommates because multi-adult households are where this gets complicated. Now, we do allow tenants to split rent payments. So, for example, the two roommates we just placed, both get the same invoice, both set up their bank info for their side, each pays their half, and everybody's happy. That's a real convenience, and we won't pretend otherwise. But there's a non-negotiable rule underneath it. The moment one pays and the other doesn't, we go into the system mid-month and shut off automatic invoicing so they can't keep making partial payments. And here's why that matters. In California, if you've served a 3-day notice to pay rent or quit, and then accept a partial payment during that window, you've canceled your own notice. It's voided. You have to draft and serve a brand new one and restart the clock. So a well-intentioned, something's better than nothing mindset can cost you weeks in delay should you need to evict. Your software needs to be able to say no on your behalf because in the moment, you might not. Now, the other roommate story, and this one's just an unforced error on our part, but we had a tenant who put an email address on his application that, after he moved in, he never actually checked. It wasn't a fake one, just an old one. We set up his QuickBooks invoicing with the email he gave us because, well, that's what he gave us. And he paid late, repeatedly, for 6 months. He wasn't broke and he wasn't disrespectful. He just wasn't seeing the invoice until after the first. It took him 6 months to finally call and ask us to switch it. And he was never late again after that. $0 to fix, 6 months of friction because nobody verified it. So the takeaway applies to every tenant, not just roommates. At move-in, confirm the email they've given you is the one they actually use. Same with the phone number for text. And turn on reminders on the second of the month. Make sure they've paid that rent.
Shoot, our QuickBooks system is set up to send the invoice on the 15th, so 2 weeks before it's due. The invoice states a reminder on it that they should pay by the 25th, so it's received by us on time. And if it's not paid by the 27th, they get another email reminder with the link to the invoice. And then another one on the 1st if that's not paid, and then the last one on the 3rd.
Which, again, only helps if the tenant is receiving those emails. Wrong email address, and it makes no difference how many times you send it out.
Right. And I'm fairly certain that all landlord management software has boxes to check to initiate these reminders. And if you're not using software, you can email or text reminders yourself. Use your smartphone to set up reminders to tell you, quote unquote, text or email tenants rent reminder. An email 10 days out and a text a couple days before the due date takes almost no effort and quietly eliminates a whole category of late payments. Okay, so I want to close on the thing that makes all of this easier, which is tenant screening. Because honestly, the reason we rarely deal with late rent isn't our late fee or our software. It's that we are very thorough on the front end. We can take up to 3 full days to complete our screening, and we don't apologize for it. We want proof of income. We want a solid credit report. And you guys, we did a whole episode on how to read credit reports. It was episode 49, Analyzing Credit Reports for Tenant Selection, because that's a genuine skill. We want at minimum 2 landlord references or 1 long-term tenancy of 3+ years. We call the employer. We call the personal references, and we actually call them. The reference nobody calls is the one that could have told you something. We had one reference that we called, and one of our questions is, do they have pets? And his answer was, yeah, I think he has a dog. And there was no mention of this dog anywhere on the application or anything like that. It was not a ESA or anything like that. We called him out on it, and he said, yeah, I do have a dog. I'm going to have it stay with my parents. So had we not asked, we wouldn't have known that. Now, all of that is upstream of rent collection. The best predictor of whether somebody pays you on time is whether they paid landlords on time. And sometimes you find that out by picking up the phone. One caution, though, and you're going to hear this theme all episode, screening rules and what you're allowed to consider vary a lot by state and city. So you need to know your local rules. Then write your criteria down for everyone to see. That means it's stated in your rental ads. It is messaged, text, or emailed when you pre-screen the interested party before even showing them the unit. And it's on a paper that you hand to them when you do showings. And it's in the email when you send that application. We do this, you guys, and it is so, so important to be consistent on this. You must apply them identically to every single applicant.
All right, so let's close this out. Here's what we recommend you do this week. 1. Get off paper checks and cash apps and onto a real platform with autopay. 2. Know your float. That's the lag time between the tenant paying and when it hits your account. And put that timing in your lease. 3. Tighten up that lease. You want a clear due date, received, not sent, with a short grace period, and use the joint and several liability clause on every lease. 4. Get your late fee reviewed by an attorney so it actually holds up. 5. Offer credit reporting as a dangling carrot. 6. Verify the email and phone number at move-in and switch on automatic reminders. And 7. Screen like your cash flow depends on it, because it does.
And I want to point out the theme here, because that's the real point. Every one of those is something that you set up once, not something you have to do every single month. That's the whole shift here. Stop being the collections department and start being the person who designed a system that doesn't need one. And one last time, because it matters most on this topic. A lot of the legal specific stuff we gave you today was in California, because that's primarily where we operate and that's the law we follow. Late fees, grace periods, notice requirements, credit reporting, all of that varies enormously state to state and sometimes even city to city. So please go check your own before you change anything. And where the law doesn't tell you what to do, our default is always the same. Use common sense with compassion.
Yes, and as a reminder, in a legal capacity, we are not professionals. The information provided here on this podcast is just that, information. We are here to tell you what works best for us, but we highly recommend you consult a professional in your rental property area for guidance on how to carry out any of this stuff.
Yeah, very good advice. All right, you guys, I want to thank everyone for being here. And we love when you engage with us, and it seems like everyone is really enjoying the content that we put out. So if you do like what we're here talking about, and you know another landlord who might also enjoy our podcast, would you please share us with them? And if you have it in you, could you leave us a kind review so that we can continue to move up those charts? As always, subscribe on your favorite podcast platform so that each week our episodes are automatically there and ready for you to listen to. And I know none of these things really seem like a big deal, but ultimately it's a big deal to us because it lets us know that you want us to keep making more episodes, to share our knowledge and our experience with you. So please hit like, hit subscribe, and tune in every week. Also, check out the show notes for all the links to any products or other episodes that we mentioned here today. Thanks again for listening. Until next time, you've got this, landlords.